Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Danielle Mimbs from STEAM Made Simple on Instagram. Danielle is a former educator turned stay-at-home mom. She's staying home with her three boys right now, but she has such a passion for early childhood education, especially STEAM foundations, that she started an Instagram account to share all of her tips and tricks with other parents and educators who want to make sure that their toddlers and preschoolers and kindergartners are ready for success. Danielle and I talk about so many topics in this podcast interview. I'm so excited for you to get to meet her. But we really highlight the importance of emotional regulation, independent play, and making sure that kids are set up for success because the jobs that they're going to be doing in the future are not the jobs that are created right now. We want to help our kids learn how to think, be problem solvers, creative thinking, and all of those 21st century skills so that they can be successful in the future. If you have any questions about this episode, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Littles Love Learning Blog, or you can reach out to Danielle. She's on Instagram at STEAM Made Simple. Hey, Danielle, welcome to the Littles Love Learning podcast.
Hi, glad to be here.
Well, I am super excited to interview you today and to get to know you better because we only recently connected on Instagram. So I feel like I have so many questions about your story and your background just for my own personal curiosity. And I'm sure that the listeners will love to hear as well. But this is going to be really great. So let's get started. I want to hear about what inspired you to become a teacher, your background in education, all the background info that we need to know.
Okay, so I definitely, as a kid, always like loved the whole idea of being a teacher. But when I went to school, it was really I decided to do psychology. So I really like fell in love with like the mind and like how it works. And it just took a couple of like child development classes to be like, oh no, like I have my minor in psych, and I was like, I gotta switch because I do like I need to go with this education journey. So I just like absolutely fell in love with it in college. So I transferred schools and I went to a private school for elementary education. And I just had the time of my life. Like it was just everything. Going into a school was like a high for me. It was just so amazing being around the learning and like the passion from the teachers. And it was just something that I wanted to do. And I kind of just went from there. So I started off with sixth grade, teaching sixth grade, and then I moved to second grade. I was in a Title I school, um, which taught me a lot. I transferred to a different school to try to go into more of like the tech STEAM industry type of deal, and it was very different. Great experience. And then my husband got a dream job, so we moved to Michigan, and I taught second grade here as well. And then once the pandemic hit, COVID, I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And right now I have three boys who are keeping me on my toes. And yeah, so it's
That is
pretty
so
much the back
awesome.
end.
I actually relate to that because I also have a minor in psych, and I actually started out as a psychology major when
No
I was in
way.
college. Yeah. Part of the reason was when I started college, I felt like being a teacher wasn't enough, quote unquote, enough. I felt like I
Yeah.
needed to do something big with my life, like be a child psychologist or something different than just teaching. And I love psychology, but when I had some child development classes, when I had some experience of what it would be like to be an education major, just like you, I just fell in love with it. I loved going in the schools. I loved being around the kids and the teachers and setting up the room and talking about centers and all the things. And so I knew I was in the right place when I made that switch.
Yeah, that's so funny. I don't think I've like most people that I know, it's just like, oh yeah, it was like I always knew. And I did like have that rooted, but like I've never met someone who kind of has like a similar story. So it's really cool. Like and the human mind like is fascinating because like I mean, there was a period of time where I was like, I'll probably work in a prison and I will, like
Oh, wow.
really under oh yeah, no, like and it's funny, like when I've said that in like interviews before and they're like, "Oh, interesting,"
I mean, do you like
Um,
true crime?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I kind of feel like they should hire me like on the side because I could figure things out. So.
I love that so much. See, there's
Yeah.
so many layers
I
to you.
know.
So you said you got really interested in STEAM education, and not everyone might that's listening, they might not know what STEAM is. So if you want to explain that, that would be great.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that because when I started this Instagram page, a lot of people in my like personal life, which a lot of them are teachers, but the ones who aren't, they're like, what is STEAM? And like
Right?
someone thought that like I made it up. And I was like, no, no, this is the future, my friends. So STEAM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And it is using all of the disciplines interchangeably, and we're using them at the same time. So think of like like projects that is incorporating all of them at the same time. So yes, I did go to a school, and I feel very blessed to have worked with, even though I'm like, you are my mentor. I will do whatever you want to do. Like she was so amazing. And she was a mentor, still is. And she really utilized her position as STEAM foundations. She transformed her library into a makerspace. She did not do any like hand holding for kids. I mean, she just totally gave them full control. And she's literally building the future by like just inspiring educators like me and then also students who come to her. There's students who are already authors and they're inventors, and it's because she believed in them. And that was just so eye-opening for me to see. And then also, for my master's program, I had to interview a couple of superintendents of districts. And there was this one superintendent that I interviewed of a STEAM school. And what she said to me, like back then, was just so, this was like, I don't even know, 5, 6 years ago. She said, we are preparing kindergartners and children and elementary kids. We're preparing them for jobs that don't exist yet,
Right.
right? So it's like, how do you do that? That goes beyond, just the way that we were taught math. That goes beyond like a social studies textbook, right? Like, how would we do that? And that's really focusing on the foundational skills, which is something that you and me connect so well on, is like taking, I guess like a good analogy that I recently heard too was, um, when you go to the doctor, they often like say like, oh, okay, so we're going to send you a referral for neurology, or we're going to send you a referral for a urologist. And, it's all separate when you really have to look at the whole picture and the whole body because everything is connected. And that's like how it is with education with kids too. It's like, yeah, you can teach math in isolation and you can teach reading in isolation, but like when you focus on like what you're doing, like reading through play and reading through um a different not just like an isolated place, and you're really focusing on like social emotional learning in the process and the whole child, that's when the magic happens, and that's when a kid reaches their full potential. And it's um a huge movement that you're a part of, I'm a part of it, that we're just really trying to begin with the end in mind when we're teaching kids.
Absolutely. I love that analogy with the doctors. And I feel like there is a push now for more functional medicine. When people are going to the doctor, they do want someone who understands the whole body. There will always be specialists, of course, but you want your main doctor to understand how everything is working together. Because if something is wrong in one area, it's probably affecting all these other areas. And so I love that analogy. And just like you were saying, the hands on project based learning where everything is connected, that's what we want to teach our kids because the jobs they're doing in the future don't exist yet. Think about the jobs we're doing. Influencers on Instagram, those of us who have online businesses, those sorts of things didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. So when we were in school, no one could prepare us. Here's how you're going to be an influencer on Instagram. Here's how you're
Hmm.
going to share tips online. But when we can teach kids how to think, we can teach kids how to problem solve, we can help kids with their emotional regulation, no matter what jobs are coming down for them from the future, what jobs they're going to be doing, they're going to be ready because of the preparation is not specific to that job. It's more of this holistic preparation.
Right, right. It's like the 21st century skills. If they don't have that, then like you're not going to be able to have things really sink in, right? Especially
Absolutely.
with like reading too.
So you are so passionate about education. You were in education and then you decided to transition to be a stay-at-home mom. How many kids did you have at the time?
It was literally when the world shut down. So I was teaching, and it was a week before I went into labor, and they were like, okay, we're switching to virtual. So
Oh my
like
goodness.
I was teaching my students, and then I remember like texting my partner, my teaching partner, and I was like, hey, like, can you take my virtual class today? And that's when I went into labor and had my baby. So I did, and I love teaching. I love education, but no one believes me. I didn't get a maternity leave, right? Because I moved from
Wow.
till Michigan. So like I didn't get a leave. I had to give that like pay for it. So I got 2 weeks. That's how much sick days I had. And then I had to pay them to let me
Gosh.
take a little bit more. And I had to pay them back when I left the district. So
Oh my
that's a
gosh.
real thing. I had to pay thousands of dollars just to have a baby for like leaving my job and then keeping my job. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, my son, he had like severe medical needs, and no one quite knew what was wrong with him. And there was just like I always say, it's like it was a sign from God because I did not know if I was going back to school that following year because it was like the summer. And the day that I had to make the decision, he had to be admitted to the emergency room, and I was like,
Wow.
I have to just be with him like full time. But I did finish out the school year when my maternity leave ran out. So I did do that. My mom came and lived with us while she would watch my baby while I would go into the other room and do virtual instruction with my students. So I did that, and it was really like it's sad, like that chapter closing. I didn't know that it was kind of like my last hurrah. So it's just kind of like it's a bittersweet thing, right? Like I love being with my kids, and I can't imagine it any other way. I have friends who are full-time teachers, and they have, they're being like a mom when they get home, and that's like witching hour, and that's so incredibly hard. But I feel very blessed and very fortunate to have that opportunity to do it as well. And yeah, so that's how I kind of became a stay-at-home mom. And now I have 3 boys, so they're all 4 and under.
Oh my goodness. Three boys, four and under keep you so busy.
Yeah.
I can relate to that knowing that those teacher moms who are working full time and coming home at the end of the day to their kids, it is so exhausting. I only did that for 3 months when I was a long-term sub in kindergarten because I had left the classroom when I had my first child. So I didn't go back until I had both of my kids and I was subbing for 3 months and it was the hardest 3 months. You're just trying to balance it all and you want to do it all well. And there's just not enough time in the day for everything. And so once I had that experience, I've always been so in awe of teacher moms, but now it's just to a whole nother level. They are just
Mhm.
incredible, especially the ones who teach at their child's school. So their child's in their classroom in the morning and then their child goes to class and then comes back at the end of the day. So that
Mhm.
teacher is never alone in her room
Yeah.
or in his room. Their child is always there with them. So it is definitely exhausting.
Yes, for
Now,
sure.
did you feel the pull when you were staying home that you wanted to continue in education? Is that why you started your Instagram account?
So everyone was always asking, like, oh, are you coming back? Are you coming back? There's this position. And like I kept, I think it was like 3 years where they were like, oh, do you want us to extend? Where like if I wanted to come back, I'd have a position in the district. So I kept saying like, maybe, maybe. And then I had my second, and I was like, like what you said, like there's no way, like if I have the option to stay home, like there's no way I'm gonna feel like I'm doing enough in it. Either way, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I still feel like I'm not doing enough, and I have that guilt. So it was just more of like, right now it's staying at home, and then I started to I had very bad like postpartum anxiety. And then so I was seeing a therapist, and she was like, you need to have like an outlet for you. And I didn't have that. Like, I didn't have that healthy balance of like actually carving out time that's just mine because I was like, I don't need that. I don't need that. I want to be with my baby all the time. Like, I don't need something for me, but she like forced me to do it. And so I started working out, which I hate, but like it was really, really good for me to like work out. And I really liked the class. I really liked the community. And then it was actually when I was like really pregnant with my second, I was like, I can't work out anymore. But that was so good for me and I needed it. And I was like, what else do I love? And my master's degree is in curriculum and instruction. And I love, love, love creating curriculum. I love very, very passionate about individualized learning. and creating plans to make every child succeed. So whether it's like one test, we could do it 27 different ways. That's fine. Like I love that kind of creation. So I used that as like a creative outlet and just started creating and putting products on Teachers Pay Teachers. I didn't have like a niche yet. And I had a lot of advice from like people that I would buy curriculum from when I was a teacher. And I would reach out to them and I'm like, hey, like, any tips for someone just getting started? They're like, niche down, stay in your lane. And I was like, I can't do that. I love everything. And I still, like, to this day, I struggle so bad with that. Um, but I just started doing like TPT. And I remember sitting on the couch with my husband and like I looked on my phone, I had that notification I made like 40 cents. And it was like, I think I might have cried. Like I was just like, someone like a teacher, which I know, like we don't make money, like someone used their hard-earned teacher salary to buy a product that I made, like with my laptop. I was like, I felt so honored. And I wish I knew who they were because I wanted to be like, oh, can I see it now? Like I was so excited. And it was more of like, how people like journal or songwrite or whatever. Like mine's like creating. And it was just cool to get 40 cents for that. I mean, it was amazing. And then my husband was really like, you're really talented. Like, let's just start a website. And I was like, no, no, I don't need a website. I'm just doing this. So I did TPT for a year and he was like, I'll just make you a website. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, you might as well start an Instagram. And I was like, I hate social media. I'm not doing social media. And so I did. And I was just going to put my TPT resources on there, but it was kind of weird because the people who started following my account were parents. It wasn't, I mean, like a ton of teachers are on there. A lot of my friends are teachers anyway, but it was a lot of like parents needing help. And I was like, okay, so I am very passionate about teaching kids. I'm very passionate about helping teachers. Like I've done PDs and all that kind of stuff. I was like, what if there's like a need for parents and they actually, because there's like this whole like homeschooling movement too going on and I don't know how they do it. So anyway, I was like, maybe I should kind of like gear myself towards parents. So I've kind of been like this like chameleon, I feel like just kind of like going with the need of what I see. And that's probably why I feel lost every day on social media. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, you're obviously doing something right because your account is growing. And I know that parents are looking to you for advice and support and help, especially with those foundational skills for the toddlers and the preschoolers before they head off to kindergarten.
Yes. Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what some of those skills are, what some of the tips are that you share, and how you feel like you're supporting parents? Because I know they're coming into your DMs and asking you questions and asking for support and guidance. So, what are kind of the patterns that you're seeing?
So the patterns are when it like really comes down to it is emotional regulation and a lot of like battles, tantrums, going back and forths between screens. And the hard thing is with my DMs is like I kind of am doing it all. And I feel like I need to start like niching down a bit, but like I just had a one-on-one with a mom and I helped her like I was the parent advocate for her son's IEP. And then I was like doing another one-on-one with a homeschool curriculum. And then another person wants math tips. And then the other person I was writing a script for her to use with her son because he was unable to like share with like his best friend in like social situations and have a full-blown meltdown. And then it's like, so I'm all over the place. Like I'm helping teachers, parents, and I'm like, I love it all, but I'm like, is this like even like doable? Like, I don't know if I should just kind of like stick to one. So it's been a learning curve for sure, having a social media, and I'm a people pleaser. So like I want to do it all, but it's also like exhausting doing so many different things. But then, and everyone's like, just pick what you're like mostly passionate about. And it's like, I'm sure you can relate to this as well, but it's like being an elementary school teacher, like we did do it all. And I'm so passionate about the whole child. Like every single child has a story, every single child learns differently, and every single child has different passions and interests. And like, so my answer for everything is like, well, it depends. Like, let's like,
So true.
like let's learn a little bit more. And like when you peel back those layers, like, I mean, I've had kids with like any behavior you can think of, like I've had it. Like from like being punched in the face to
My
like, I mean, the
gosh.
craziest stories, craziest stories. and I love them all. And I was just like, well, like there's a reason why he punched me, or like there's a reason why he stole my food. Like, and you peel back the layers and it's like, oh, he was dropped off at school at 6 a.m. and he didn't eat breakfast and he didn't like any of the food there. Like, go ahead and steal my lunch, dude. Like, go for it. And it's like, instead of like punishing and like getting this obedience from kids, like they have so much to teach us. And yes, I do believe in like boundary setting, of course. Like, boy, do my boys need boundaries, but like they have so much to share with us. And I think like something that I like to say is like it sounds silly, but like I've said it to teachers too before, but when you look at a kid and real like they're real human, they have real impact and they have real things that they need to share with you, and they're capable of so many amazing things. Like we need to do what what we can do to support them so that they can release those interests and passions in like a positive way.
And going back to what you said at the beginning of this interview, we are preparing them for jobs that don't even exist yet. And this is how we do it by helping them with that emotional regulation, by helping them to find their passion, find what they love, and figure out how they're going to use their energy in a positive way to get to those goals. Even for our little toddlers and for our preschoolers, they are, like you said, they're real humans with real feelings. They are not just these little robots where
I
we
know.
expect them to be in line and following everything we say all the time. It's never going to happen.
I know. I know. I'm glad we're on the same page with it.
And when you're supporting parents, especially parents who don't have a background in child development or in education, you're able to support so many kids from all over the world, which is just the coolest part about social media. I am with you. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I just got a message today from someone in Africa who had found
Oh,
my YouTube
cool.
videos and was using them with the kids that she was working with. So the impact that we can have now outside of the classroom, we can continue that love of education and supporting kids all over the world. It's just incredible. We can
Yeah.
really shape the future.
Yes. And
Makes me so excited.
it's like a ripple effect, right? It's like who I don't know what all my students are doing. Like my first year, and I love former students when they reach out. It's so fun for me. But like you don't know, like something that you could have said like had this ripple effect. And like I'll never even forget like my first practicum experience, like just going into a classroom to observe. I wasn't even teaching a lesson, and the teacher she was like, "Do you want to do the read aloud?" And I was like, "Do I? Are you kidding? Do I want to do the read aloud? Of course I want to do the read aloud." Like I could not believe she was like giving me a book to read to this. I was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." And I like read it with such passion. I was so nervous. It was a fifth grade classroom, and this one student, her name was Kate. I have no idea what she's doing right now, but she wrote on a post-it note and she said, "You're going to be a great teacher and you're really good at reading." And I was like,
Oh,
oh my gosh. Like, and so her doing that made me, in my next several years of teaching, I would like start the year by saying, like, hey guys, if someone's like doing something that you think's really cool, here's a post-it note. And I would have all these post-it notes in my classroom, and I'm like, go give them a little note, give them a little surprise. You don't even have to sign it. Just like, and so like this fifth grader started this with like an adult. She taught me like how to teach my students, you know what I mean? And it's like what we're doing as teachers or as content creators or helping parents, like who knows the conversations that it's I would love to find this girl again and tell her like how much she's helped like so many students just because of what she did to me. And it's like as teachers, we know like there's a ripple effect and we have to have that hope and, something along the way. And the former students that I have talked to, I'm like, they don't remember like the lessons that are from the textbook. They're more just like, do you remember when you were so silly and you like tripped and like, and then you made like a whole like lesson about it, or like, do you remember that time that you dressed up? And they remember like the play and they remember the connection and the laughter. And that's when the learning sticks as well.
that is so beautiful. I love that story. I hope we can find Kate. We need to find Kate and tell her
I know.
what a difference she made. I mean, for a fifth grader to do that, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And I think it was like her teacher who kind of like instilled that kind of like positive talk, but she didn't need to do that. She doesn't know me. I just like came to the classroom and then the teacher was like, "Do you want to?" She was probably so burnt out, exhausted. Like, "Can you just read these kids a book?" And I was like my first time doing a read aloud and I was like, No way. Yeah.
That is adorable.
Hmm.
Well, let's transition a little bit to something you talk about a lot online, which is independent play. We are both super passionate about play based education. I love play based activities. I talk a lot about that with teaching reading, but there's also this importance of kids being able to play on their own. So, not parent directed, not adult directed, but really child directed, child led, all of that, all about the child. And that can be really tricky for toddlers and preschoolers and tricky for parents to figure out how to facilitate that. So if you could just give maybe a couple of quick tips for the listeners, that would be great.
Yeah. So independent play, I try to keep things simple, which is really, really hard for me because I overcomplicate things and because there's so much to everything. And it's like it depends. And I like there's like I can see I'll like hang out with a friend and I'll see their kid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you see what he's doing? Like, he's problem solving because, and I can just go and dive into it. And I'm like, how do I like really peel back to the layers for like what parents are going through right now? And I say independent play, but like if you really want to know, it's STEAM play. Like it's STEAM foundations, right? It's the foundational skill in order to practice those 21st century skills. So like yes, independent play, every single parent is like, "Oh my gosh, I need a minute to like drink my coffee." So I'm using that because it is real. Like we do need to teach our kids independence. A lot of kids are not knowing how to play anymore, but it is also STEAM. So a lot of parents are like, "Well, I don't know. My kids are just like we're just like in this habit of screen time, right? Like we're just having it." And so I was just talking to a mom. She was like, my kid cannot independently play, like at all, like does not do anything. Like I set the timer, I do all this stuff. And I was just like, okay, let's stop. Let's just talk about like before step one. Like before step one, your child does independently play. You're just not watching, right? So like let's just watch your kid all day long. What are they doing that is independent? Because that is independent play. And maybe that's watching a bird go to a bird feeder and eat some food or something. And they're doing that by themselves without you directing, look at the bird, look. Without you doing that, that's independent play. Right. So something so simple, and that's a passion or interest. Because if they're watching a bird go to a bird feeder, okay, so maybe they like animals, maybe they like watching birds. Maybe that's going to be the time where you're going to have a structured like 5 minute, like this is what whether you call it like playtime, independent playtime, steam time, we call it like ready, set, steam. That is independent play. Maybe your kid likes to watch the garbage truck. That's also independent play. Maybe your kid likes to crumble paper. Like that's independent play. Like if you just like I tell parents, I'm like, just observe your kid. Like, and I in my guide, I have like a journal. Like you would be so surprised if you just sat back and then you're giving specific praise to that child. Like, wow, you're so capable. I love how you were able to just like look at that bird. You were so quiet, and then after you're not interrupting during that like precious time. And then I think another like big tip is to start small. And I was also talking to another mom, and she was like, she was doing great with independent play, and then she wasn't playing. So I paused the timer. And I was like, no, no. What do you mean you paused the timer? And she was like, well, she wasn't doing anything. So I paused it and I said, okay, I'll start the timer when you're playing again. And I'm like, she can do nothing. That is her independent playtime. If she chooses, who knows what's going on in her head? Like maybe
Right.
she's like coming up with like, so we don't want to like break that focus. Like if she's like uh, do in that yes space that you've created, which parent like a lot of the parents that I know are, not doing whole entire rooms like I have, but they're doing like a shelf or a corner and that's all you need. You don't need a big room to do it. And you're starting off small. And then so I guess like the next tip I would say is I would do a visual, like I would graph it for parents, right? Like if your kid made it 2 minutes, like graph it and you celebrate the heck out of it. Like that's awesome. And to just like not have these big expectations and like saying like, oh, you never play alone because like whatever you say to your kid, like that's like what they're going to believe of themselves. So it's just
So
being
true.
very like mindful and finding the success, celebrating the progress, and it will
Those are
happen.
great tips. Yeah, I've never heard that before. Think about what they're already doing independently, and that can be classified as independent play. And I just love the idea that it doesn't have to look the way we think it's supposed to look. We think independent play is my child over there doing a puzzle or playing a game by themselves or however we think it's going to look. but it's going to look the way your child wants it to look. And they're each so different and they play so differently. So, really meeting them where they are and taking you out of the equation and your expectations out of the equation, I think that's so smart.
I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Like parents, like, and I've done it too, where I'm like, and like, if you buy your kid puzzles and they're not doing it, like don't make them do puzzles, or you buy them wooden blocks because it's like an open-ended toy and they don't like wooden blocks. Don't make them play with wooden blocks. Like I don't know what to say. Like you can try setting it up different ways. If they're not into it, like fine. Like whatever it is. Like I mean, my second born, he is very active. So I'm actually working on like a high energy toddler guide. And his independent play is very much like climbing over pillows, and like that is still independent play. Still,
Right.
yeah.
And they play so differently. I have a daughter and a son, and their independent play when they were that age, so different.
Yes.
Just the way that they interact with the world and what they enjoy doing. And I could never force my son to do what my daughter did. And if I had ever said that to him, you need to play like she did, you should be doing this like she did. How would that would just dampen his spirit if I had ever done
Yes.
something like that. He's a totally different child with a totally different brain and like to play his way. And so I just
Hmm.
think it's important that we remember they're all different, just like we're all different.
Right. Exactly.
Well, you have guides, I know, for parents. Can you talk a little bit about those guides and what you offer?
Yeah. I started creating, I was like, what do I think is like, what do I want to get out in the world first? Like, and so I made, okay, on TPT that I talked about earlier, I started with a calm down corner and it was very, very effective for teachers. I had awesome feedback from it. I got to see it in a bunch of different classrooms and I was like, oh, great. Like the visuals are like helping and they're using. But like teachers have extensive like professional development on like social emotional learning. So I said, okay, I don't want to just sell visuals to parents because that won't work. It's not going to work. If you give your kid like a breathing technique and you're like, okay, do this when you're upset, it's not going to work. Like,
Right.
so I decided to take everything I learned in my master's program, everything I learned as a mom. I actually am back in trainings. Like, I completed like the space program, supportive parents for kids with anxiety. And like, I took everything that I knew along with research and science and I put it into a guide of like, let's start at the beginning. Let's understand your child. Let's understand their sensory profile, whether they're a sensory seeker, avoider, or a combo kid. Okay, like let's move to the next step. Now that we know that, let's give an example. Where do you fit? And I did all these quizzes and tests and like to have parents get the whole picture of their child and then they could tailor strategies and techniques that I provide in the guide to help their kid learn emotional regulation and to set up like a calming space in their own home. Um, and so that's my first guide, and that's probably the one I'm the most proud of. It is very like I guess I should probably call it a book. I mean,
Wow.
I did not know how to like shorten it. I'm like, oh, but like if a kid is a sensory seeker here, but like avoider, like I did it all. Like I was like, okay, well, if this is the case, then you go here. So it's a very, very well done. It took a really, really long time. Um, and then I kind of wanted to feel the need of like figure out the need of what my audience had, and I kept like hearing the independent play. So I did the Steps to Independence guide, which is teaching your child the skill of independent play. So like I didn't if I backtrack when I started my account, it was a like an activity page, like a STEAM activity page, and parents were like, "Oh my gosh, these are so cool, so inspirational." But I feel like a bad mom because I'm not doing these every day. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not doing these every day. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, there's no way." And I didn't want to come across as like an account that's like not relatable in that way. So that's why I started off with SEL. And then I did independent play so that you could teach your kid the actual skill so that you don't have to do elaborate setups every day. And so, like, if you want that guide that will teach your child to be an independent learner, you can give them a pine cone, a glue stick, and something like toilet paper, and they're going to create an amazing thing after like you implement this guide and you follow the steps. Um, and then right now, what I'm working on is like people are saying, okay, my kid has so much energy. I try to do like a sensory bin, but they just throw it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, my kid too. Yeah. So I'm doing a 2-year-old to like 4 to 5-year-old high energy guide of like what I did with my 2-year-old. So he is my inspiration. Um, and I am doing activities because that's, I feel like that's just like what parents want right now are like quick, simple activities, which are fine, but I do want them to know that that's like a scaffold, right? Like it's
Right.
not gonna teach them, it will help encourage independent play, but you like your end game should not be like your kid depending on you to set up the activities. Like when I set up activities for my kids now, they're just like, well, maybe try it this way. Like they're very like they're so much more confident in their play than like me having something for them. And if a parent is more entertaining, like they're, you know what I mean? Like we got to
Right.
let kids be bored and figure it out because babies, they're like ready to go. Like they're ready to like play with anything. And then like somehow it kind of gets taken out of them. And it's like all like good intention mistakes that we're making. But I'm trying to like give my audience like what they're looking for and kind of just going from there.
Those sound amazing. I wish I'd had those when my kids were younger. That would
Yeah.
have been so helpful. And I just love the idea that you're taking inspiration from your own kids because each of our kids is so different. If you have more than one child, you understand that they're all going to be so different. And also from your audience, seeing what they need, what they are struggling with, and then you can go in and support them. And I know a long-term goal of yours is to have a course, which is going to be
Yes.
phenomenal because everything that you're talking about really would just be so helpful in a course to walk parents step by step through all this.
I can't wait to have you help me step by step. You're like my mentor with it because I'm
We'll
like, I
get
have
this
no
ready for
idea.
you.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun. I am so glad that you came on the podcast. I know you do have a freebie to offer to the listeners before it is becoming a paid product, maybe in 2025. So, do you want to just briefly mention that?
Yeah. So I have a couple of freebies on my page, and I am going to be like changing that freebie to a paid product in 2025. So you should probably grab it. It's a kindergarten readiness checklist. And I perfected this. This was like one of my first products and I wanted it to be perfect. So like I sent it to principals, I sent it to teachers. I was like, rip it apart, rip it apart. What does it not have? And so like I got it to a point where it's like teachers are handing it to parents and like they're buying it, sending it, principals are using it, and it doesn't just focus on like the skills that parents think that kids need to know. It's really about the whole child. And of course, I threw STEAM skills in there too because that's the 21st century skills, but like social emotional learning, like focusing on like reading through play and like those sensory activities that you can do. So it's literally a checklist and it's categorized by each domain, all clickable so that you can either print it out or you can have it on your phone or your iPad or your computer. And it's very user friendly and I know people like to just like have a checklist. I sure do. So it's a very easy guide to have. And right now it is free.
Well, I will definitely link that below. So if you're listening to this, grab it in real time before it becomes a paid product. I'm going to grab it myself because I totally want to check this out. I think kindergarten readiness is such a big topic. So for you to be able to give parents something that's more actionable, I think that's super helpful. So we'll link
Yeah.
all of that below. Before you go, I do have one more question for you. I always ask my guests because this is the Littles Love Learning podcast. What do you love most about working with littles?
Oh man, there's a lot. Um, I love seeing how different their potential is. And I love seeing how we talked about how different their passions are. And I love being a part of helping them figure it out without directing and just giving them the tools and the skills to have them become this person that they were meant to be.
Oh, that's beautiful. I just feel so grateful to be able to work with kids, and I'm sure you do too, because like you said, they teach us so much more
Yeah,
than we teach them.
absolutely.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you online, because I know after listeners hear this episode, they're going to want to connect with you and find out everything that you have to offer.
You can find me on Instagram. That's where I am most active, even though my goal is to move on to like YouTube and websites as well, and maybe even a podcast. But you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is Steam Made Simple.
Perfect. I'm going to link all of that below. And thank you again, Danielle, for your time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.